Welcome everyone and good afternoon. It is First Thursdays at 3 and we have an amazing lineup. If people are missing this, I hope that whoever attends will share on their social media and hopefully people will get to watch this on our YouTube channel. All right, so First Thursdays at 3 is an initiative by Quote This Woman Plus, and we also refer to Quote This Woman Plus as QW Plus. For those who have been here before, you know this, but just for any newbies, QW Plus is a gender justice organization who's really here to amplify the voices of women plus experts within the media space, right? So it's connecting women plus to journalists. And that's done through a database. If you are joining and you're not part of the database, please make sure that you do sign up. We need to have a database with strong women experts, women plus experts. And this is what we do. We connect you to the rest of the world. And today's lineup, we have two amazing experts who will take us through how to really prepare in terms of and what happens in terms of interviews with journalists, whether it be print media or whether the person's actually speaking to you like we are now, and how to prepare for that. So why does it matter that we even have something like Quote This Woman Plus? Well, I've said it earlier, there's only about 20% of women's voices being heard in the media. And so stories are being told through a very narrow lens. And this is one way to kind of shift that discourse, making sure that there is a database with the experts and connecting those experts to journalists. And why does this session matter to you? Well, it's about getting you ready for that interview. Once you've registered onto the QW Plus database, you are now, accessible by the media, if I can put it that way. A journalist can reach out to us and ask us about a certain expertise, and we'd be able to give you your details to them. So a session like this is just telling you how to prepare for those, because very often we might not have thought about what happens the minute you get that email that says this journalist or this newspaper or whatever else wants to get to know you a little bit better. So that was my long speech. Let me move on to the two experts we have, and it is such a pleasure. I'm just going to give you a little short bio.
Okay.
Both.
Sorry.
Oh, Tishle, are you good? Oh, there we go. Okay, this is what happens. So some of the pitfalls, some of the things to look out for. I'll start off with Renee Moody. Renee Moody worked as a reporter on the Cape Times before moving into sub-editing at the Cape Argus. When she moved from there, she moved on to online journalism at Independent Online in 1999. In her years at the Independent Online, she did it all. I love that sentence. When I saw that, I'm like, I can actually see this. Editing stories at speed, running the front page, working on various entertainment and lifestyle channels. And yeah, she's done it all, right? So live blogging, finding free pictures, setting up social media channels, and the list is endless. I love this little sentence that she added there. She still hasn't figured out where the milk is in the fridge because she's been that busy. And eventually she was IOL's deputy editor. After leaving IOL in 2016, she opened her own business called Safe Hands, which you'll see on the screen as well. And that's where she does writing and editing for corporate and non-profit clients. Welcome, Renee. Then moving on, we've got Steph Saville. Steph is a journalist who's worked across many beats, first at community news level before being approached by independent newspapers, KZN titled The Mercury. She spent a couple of happy years there, scooping the Witness on their turf in Pietermaritzburg until they asked her to join their newsroom. She headed the Witness news desk as news editor for 10 years before serving as both deputy editor and then editor of that title. As deputy editor, she successfully launched the digital first operation for the Witness under News 24 banner. She is now a freelance writer with a special interest in health and has dabbled in the nonprofit sector. She says writing will always be her happy place. So that's amazing. Thank you very much and welcome, Steph.
Thanks so much, Renee. Thank you.
Okay, I am changing the landscape a little here. Okay, so we are going to go into the actual session that we have planned, and I'm going to hand over to you, Steph, as you'll be talking to us about the media being under threat, the financial model being somewhat unalive, and yeah, so over to you. What does that mean to
Thanks.
a journalist?
Thanks, Renee. Thanks for the introduction. So yeah, I think anybody who's not living under a rock will realize, and anyone with an interest in the media will realize, that there are various threats that the media face every day. And those of us who have a morbid fascination with Donald Trump will have seen the way he loves to target journalists in live media briefings. Straight away, he'll annihilate them and brand them as fake news journalists. And that's the kind of power that some politicians hold over the media. There's also the rise of conservatism in Europe, and that's fed down into parts of Africa. And sometimes those in power don't agree with what journalists are saying and what the message of the media is. So that's always a very delicate balance that the media, a threat that the media faces. We also have compromised journalists because what the media pay is often pretty poor, and it's getting worse and worse as the funding model collapses. And I'll go into that a little bit later. Journalists in their own right have to deal with a lot of harassment online. They are, the corrupt and the criminal often like to blame journalists for being outed in the media and for having having all these sins being broadcast to the world by journalists. There's also, we all know about fake news and the excellent work that News 24 is doing to out a lot of fake news sources. But that leads to distrust. When you see a story online that says South Africa is going into immediate stage 6 load shedding, and it's actually, you go to Eskom on Twitter or somewhere to check what's going on, and you realize there's nothing there because it's a fake news story, clickbait, which drives clicks to the site, and this all leads to distrust in the media. People don't know what is a fake news site and what is a reputable news site that they can trust. And I think the most important threat to media and excellence in news production is that the media's financial model is dead. I call it a crisis of capital. Revenue is shrinking. They don't know how to fund their models anymore. And the advertising model that used to mean that, news platforms got revenue from a huge array of advertisers, that's just not what anyone hoped it would be online. And few people really want to advertise in print anymore. So advertising is shrinking and shrinking. As unemployment rises and salaries shrink, few people can afford subscriptions for digital or print products. They want to read their news for free. And too many people aren't that interested in broad current affairs anymore and don't read in-depth news reports. They say it's depressing. Yeah, it is depressing, but I still think you need to know what's going on. And it worries me that so many people think that, what's happening out there doesn't affect them. I think that there's a lot of power in knowing what's happening. And I would just urge any anyone who listens to this to make sure that you stay well informed on global affairs as well as local. So all of this leads to shrinking newsrooms. In many newsrooms, experienced senior journalists are asked to make way for junior journalists who know less and who are often being set up for failure, I feel. You only have to listen to some news reports to see that the reporters are nowhere near ready to be asked complex questions about court cases, for example. And the quality of our news is unfortunately often poor. AI presents a huge change to a lot of stuff that's happening. News manufactured by AI can be wrong, and that leads to another crisis in faith by consumers of news. AI algorithms drive news to your screen, so often consumers of the of the media in general operate in an echo chamber. You're not seeing the full picture. AI-generated content like deep fakes and disinformation and fake news can really appear very, very real. And it's sometimes hard for some people to distinguish AI-produced news from human-created content, which again leads to that erosion of trust. There's also people complain of having an information overload with everything all the bombardment of information as AI drives clickbait sites your way. We know that AI can get it wrong and the ethics may be dodgy. And I was just thinking to myself, would I entirely trust an AI system that was produced by a tech billionaire, for instance, with a close allegiance to Donald Trump? I don't think I would. So what does all of this mean for journalists? And I'm literally scratching the surface of all of this because time is not on our side. But journalists are not only competing with other journalists and other titles, but they're also competing for your attention with AI. They need angles that nobody else has. Journalists are often a lot poorer than journalists used to be. They're not seeing the salaries and the bonuses that we used to see in the industry. They're often working much, much harder. They're multitasking. They're being the jack of all trades, doing print, digital, photography, blogs, Twitter videos. And the harder they're pressured to work, the less quality news is being produced. I think that's it in a nutshell, and I can answer any other questions, but I think I'm going to wrap up there, Renee, if that's okay.
Thank you so much. I'm listening to you as you're speaking, and I'm thinking, okay, we're living in a world where AI, it's here, right? So where do we find a happy medium, between what was fundamentally good ethical journalism before and what is now being presented as, some what is it, low-lying fruit. So using AI to get certain things, but how do you do that ethically? I don't know. I'll leave it open to when people have questions. And we're going to move on to Renee Moody, who's going to talk to us about a typical day at IOL. Go ahead.
Thanks for the introduction at the beginning. I'm gonna try to keep this brief. Just to say at the outset that the point of this is when you as an expert are approached by a journalist, or when you think you've just written an amazing paper and you think I'm going to approach whoever, News 24, whatever, to say, do you want to do a story about this? What I'm trying to do very briefly is paint a picture of the person you are talking to. Right. So I joined IOL in 1999. I think at the time we had about, 20 to 25 editorial staff. When I left in 2016, so that's 15 years, we were down to 12. Right. And the trick to understand the background of what that means is the financial model of online news in that time was volume. Right. So you had to get a certain amount of content on a website in order to generate enough spaces for there to be adverts. They were called ad impressions. And it was measured in the thousands. right? So you and thence in the millions. So you have to make enough stories live on any given day to serve that market. And then money would come in because people would have paid to place the advert for their car or their Nike shoe or whatever it might be. So that meant in the heyday of IRL, we were probably pushing out 350 to 400 stories a day. We weren't writing those stories ourselves, but we were taking them from the newspapers of the independent group. We were taking them from what are called wire agencies. We were writing some of our own stuff, but we were putting proper headlines on them. We were editing them according to a style. We were putting blurbs on them. We were adding pictures. We were doing all the things. That's 350 to 400 stories a day, right? By the time I left, when the staff had been cut by 2/3, we were still doing 300 stories a day. So there you are. You're the lifestyle editor. This is the day in the life of Renee Moody. You're also the deputy editor. You're the lifestyle editor, and you're the travel editor, right? So you've got in at 6 a.m. You spend 2 hours deciding what goes on the front page that goes out in a newsletter to like 50 or 100,000 people. You take a breath, you have breakfast and a cup of coffee, and you start again because there's a newsletter out at 1 p.m. Right? And you're processing stories, you're deciding what goes on lifestyle, you're dealing with staff issues, and you're pumping stories. I mean, it was a fantastic job. I love the adrenaline. And then somebody phones you and says, hello, how are you? I have not had time to go to the toilet. And they ask me how I am. So I go, I'm fine. I have the story that I think is really, they've lost me already, right? So the point is, that was high-level online journalism. A young journalist from a community newspaper might be in a very different world. But when they phone you, or you phone them, or you talk to them, the background of their lives is exactly the same. And if they're young, they haven't had experience, they haven't had training, they haven't had support, they don't have the kind of support that I had as a young person coming into journalism. And you are scared of them, but it's quite likely that they are pressured and they are tired, and then probably perhaps slightly scared of you as an expert. So what I'm trying to say is that it feels really scary to talk to the media because they have power, and they do, but it is at the end of the day a person that you are talking to who has a life and opinions. And if you can make a human connection, first, you are much more liable to be able to relax in that interview. So if you say things like, I know you're really busy, but can I? Don't go. My favorite was the experienced PR who phoned and said, hi, this is so-and-so. Can I have a minute of your time? Which gave me the gap to say, yes, but it's just a minute. What's the problem? And they would go, I've got this. And I would go, okay, fine, here's my email address, and we would be done. It needs to be that fast. You also need to understand that because that person is that busy and that pressured, if you say you're going to be available for an interview at 4 p.m. and they phone at 4 p.m. and you say, no, I'm busy now, you'll never get that phone call again. They cross you off the list. If you commit to talk to a journalist and you can't be there, let them know in advance, because you've wasted their time. And time is actually the most precious thing a journalist has. So in preparing for an interview with a journalist, I would say the two key things are: understand that that's a human being under pressure. And because they're under pressure, do what you can to make their life easy. Make it brief, make it short, be there on time, explain carefully what it is, offer to send some background information, offer to send a picture, offer to send as many things as you can to make that person's life easier. And I mean, there's a certain level at which you think, well, why should I? They're a journalist. They have a duty to talk to me. And maybe they do, but it's a win-win situation if you approach it from the basis of how can we do this together, as opposed to this is a person who has power, who should talk to me because I'm important. I mean, you may or may not be important, but to them, you're just, oh my God, it's another job, another job, another job, another job. So yeah, that's my very short thing. And then I think at this point we just see if there's any questions, Renee, from
No,
anybody.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to you online, this is your opportunity. You can unmute, you can put your hand up if you'd like, but you can put something in the chat box if you prefer. But this is your opportunity to engage. If you've had any questions about approaching the media, or anything to any of the two experts, this is the moment. Nothing? All shy now? Okay. I guess, Renee, the first thing that stood out for me is when you were saying, how busy someone is. And I was wondering, so how do I get past that first, hurdle? Because if you're saying, okay, make it brief, or I'm still telling you this is an amazing story, what is the hook there that would have made you go, okay, let me listen to this? What would have made that easier?
The thing that always makes it easier is if you say, hi, how are you? Got a minute of your time? I know you're the lifestyle editor, and I have a story about how women need help in the kitchen. I invented a thing. So I know in that small sentence, I know this person's done their homework.
Okay.
I know that they've looked me up. I know that they know that I'm the lifestyle editor. I know that they know what kind of stories I usually publish. So I'm already going to go, okay, fine, maybe there's something in this for me. Maybe it's a quick press release that I can turn into a story and it'll give me something for Friday morning. So I'm looking for, did they do their homework? Is it useful to me? Is it going to be in a format I can use fast? And the angle. So an angle is a really hard thing. The angle to a journalist, and Steph will bear me out, the angle is the thing.
Yeah.
Right? So the angle is not the president made a speech.
Yeah.
That's not an angle. The president closed down the country is an angle because of COVID. And no, you can't walk your dog. That's an angle. So the angle is what happened, what's the important thing, how does it work for my readers? I always say it's so he finishes his very long family meeting, and you phone your cousin in Australia and you say, guess what? The president made a speech. No, you say he shut the country down. So it's the thing, the first thing you would say to your friend or your whoever, it's like, what stood out for you from that? Because only that can a journalist turn into a story that is interesting to a reader. And actually, none of this is about the journalist or about you as an expert. It's about the reader.
Very true.
It's about the user. It's about the viewer. It's about the listener. What is useful to them? What is interesting to them? What will make their day? What will make them laugh? What will make them cry? What is a useful recipe? It's that there's a person out there and you're competing for their attention. So you need to put something in front of them that works for them.
Yeah.
And that's not boring. That needs to be interesting. So the thing is, if you can get the angle in that first two sentences, you're away. And if you've done your homework and know that angle works for that person, there's no point in phoning the sports editor and say, I've got a story about women in the kitchen. He's going to go, well, fine. So what?
Yeah.
Okay, what can you tell me about the rugby team? So yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. We do
I think Talana maybe wants.
Yes, we've got a question here in the chat. Talana, do you want to ask it, or are you happy for me to read? I'd like your voice in the space, it'd be nice.
I can ask it.
There we go.
I just was wondering about the value of media releases. Do they actually have any value? Should I get one written or write one myself and send it through beforehand, before contacting someone in the media?
Can I take that one?
Oh, look at that. Absolutely.
Hi, Talana.
Hi.
Talana, my experience is phone up the person, make that human connection first, and then send the media release once they know who you are and what the broad angle of your story will be. Because a news editor is often going through thousands of emails every day, and unless you're a PR pro and can catch their attention, know you can catch their attention with a very, very bold topic, of the news release, it probably could get overlooked. So I'd really rather make that phone call first and then send it, so they know to look out for it. But by all means, I mean, there are media professionals who can write your press release for you. There are freelancers who'd be only too happy to help. But if you're confident to write it yourself, then go for it. But do study guidelines on how to write a press release, because it is quite a niched document. Yeah.
Okay, I can see Renee wants to add. Go for it,
Yeah.
Renee.
And just to add, when thinking about making that phone call, I mean, in the old days, I don't know if this is true anymore in print. Steph can tell me better. When you phoned, you wouldn't get the news. The news editor is the person who bosses the reporters, right? So they decide who does what story on what day. So that is the golden person, the person wearing the crown that you want. But in the old days, they had a secretary. So the person you spoke to was actually the secretary. So the people who in those days really got on with the media were the people who made relationships with that secretary. So I know this seems weird, but if the person who answers the phone doesn't sound like who you want, still be nice to them, because they are the gatekeeper. And this very much applies in radio. Look, I'm not an expert on broadcast, but I do know that if you want a particular radio station to cover your thing because you know that's what they do, the person who you talk to is not the voice that you hear, it's the producer. So you need to stalk people on LinkedIn to find out who the producers are of shows and make friends with them. And there's something to be said for making contacts with people on social media as well. But whoever it is that answers the phone, be as brief and as succinct and angly and nice to them as you can as well, because it's possible you're not getting the actual person in power, and you may never in fact speak to them. So, there was a woman called Susan Fisser, who was the secretary to the news editor of the Argus. Her favorite phone call in 10 years was the man who phoned and said he had a story because there were invisible people around his house and he thought he should send reporters. Anyway, sorry, I just remember the invisible people. But yeah, they have stories to tell, those people.
Yeah. Thank you very much, both. Talana, I hope that has helped. If not, you can add it again into the chat and we'll take it up from there. But we're going to move on to the next part, which is preparing for interviews with journalists. And that is, Steph, what is it that we need to prepare? How do we need to show up?
Thanks, Renee. I think the most important message is to build those relationships with those journalists that are reputable and trustworthy. I think that is first prize. If you can know that you're speaking to someone who you have some kind of relationship with, that takes a lot of the anxiety out of the actual interview. So have a look and see who's writing about the stuff in your field. Phone them up, tell them that you're an expert on whatever it is that you do, and say to them you're always open to, to interviews or to questions on certain topics. And journalists will so appreciate that. So that is key, and journalists are very precious about their contacts, and they really will nurture you and love to have you on side. I think another just an important thing, which those who know me will know, that I have, my particular bugbear is jargon. So don't use jargon in your interview. If the journalist doesn't understand what you're saying, you run the risk that they're going to actually just leave it out, or you just can't risk using jargon which will alienate the journalist or readers. The minute they feel stupid is going to be the moment that they disengage, and jargon is a very big part of that.
Yeah.
Another thing, don't embellish or think that you can use it as an opportunity to do free advertising for your company. It doesn't work like that. A lot of people think it is. Promote yourself on your true knowledge and experience. Journalists deal primarily with fact and sometimes opinions based on research and experience. And then just ask yourself why this is newsworthy. You know, that's really, really important. Why would someone else care about this? But going into an interview where you've been asked by a journalist to speak on a certain topic, prepare your key points. As Renee said, keep them succinct, write them down, proofread them. You can ask a friend or a colleague to do that, and practice them. Be confident in your message. And if it means you have to fake it till you make it, do that. Make sure you find a nice quiet space where you can be interviewed without interruptions or background noises that are distracting, and be ready to listen to what the journalist is asking. You know, listen for those questions and approach them from your point of expertise. Don't be nervous. As Renee also pointed out earlier, the journalist is probably a bit in awe of you. So they're not going to bite your head off if you stumble over a few words, but again, don't unnecessarily take up their time. Another thing is to remember that not all of what you are saying will be used. It's quite possible it'll be trimmed or cut down. So always say the most important stuff first in every answer you give. Yeah, I think that's the most important part of what I was saying. I've kind of whizzed through it, but the most, you know, find the angle, as Renee said, and have your research and your background info to back that angle up.
Thank you very much. I guess I just have a question. Are you allowed to be asking journalists for the questions ahead of time if you've been approached? It doesn't matter whether it's print or...
Yeah, it kind of depends on the journalist.
Okay.
I think some of them might have prepared in advance, probably more likely those in broadcast. But if it's a journalist who's just been told by the news editor to get a story ready on, say, on avian flu because there's a scare, it's very likely that they haven't, written out questions before and researched the topic. And they're going to just shoot from the hip and ad lib and ask you what they can think of to ask you. And they'll also, they should always say to you, what do you think is important about this and what do you think the public need to know? So yeah, it really depends on the medium and the journalist.
Thank you so much. The floor is open again for any questions. So please feel free to either again unmute or you can pop it in the chat if you'd like me to read it. So that was the preparing for interviews bit. Anything? Okay, I don't want to pause too long because time is against us, but you can pop it in the chat and we'll pick it up as we go. And I guess we can move on. So yes, I've prepared for my interview. I've done everything Steph has just said, and now things are getting tricky. Renee Moody, what do? I get asked something that I'm not prepared for.
Look, this can have layers. Some of the trickiness might be that it becomes evident to you as the expert that the journalist actually knows nothing at all about this thing, which is entirely possible. That there's an avian flu outbreak, you over there do a story, and they go, avian flu? You do quick Google. I don't know. Yeah, what? So in that case, if it's somebody who plainly knows, who doesn't know anything about it, then you do your best to explain it in simple terms, because if they know nothing about it, the readers know nothing about it. I mean, the journalist is in fact the representative of the reader, really. So then you go, how can I explain this? How can I do this simply? So I think for any expert, some of your key messages should be, what are the 3 things anybody needs to know about my field? What are the 3 key things? And just have them stashed in case it's plain that this person has been thrown into the deep end on this. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that they think they know a huge amount about it and they don't know, and they don't actually. They're asking you a whole bunch of questions that are just way off base. So there's that. So there's a range of things that can happen where you will start to feel uncomfortable. One is that the journalist thinks they know something that they don't know, right? They've got facts that are wrong, possible. They've got opinions, and they're trying to steer the interview in the region of their opinions. They have politics, and they're trying to steer the interview in the region of their politics. I mean, I don't know to what extent those happen, but certainly in previous media trainings that we've done with Quote This Woman, there's almost always one expert in the room who says, you know, I had this interview with a journalist and it was plain that they had a political agenda and I didn't know what to do. So it's not supposed to happen. Journalists are supposed to attempt to be neutral, even though they're of course people with their own opinions, but the brief is to try to be as neutral as possible. So for instance, there's a journalist called Natasha Joseph who tells the story of she is pro-abortion and had to go and cover an anti-abortion protest at Parliament. And so she had to interview these people that she felt were wrong, very wrong. But she took a deep breath and she said, let me try and find out what their viewpoint is. I'm here, I have my opinion, but what do these people think? So what you want is a journalist who's doing that, saying, these are my opinions, and my advice, if you're in that interview where, the other thing that can happen, and this was brought up in one of our fellowship, our Voices Fellows meetings, is a journalist who plainly who disrespects you, basically, who treats you in a demeaning way because you're a woman or disabled, whatever that might be. In all of those cases, you say, I'm sorry, I don't like the way this interview is going. I don't want to continue. I don't want you to publish what we said, and I want the name of your supervisor, and I would like the email address and their telephone number. You don't have to talk to a person if the interview feels uncomfortable. Just because they're a journalist doesn't mean they can treat you badly. By not knowing anything, I think, is the one thing you have to actually try and help, because almost always that person will have been thrown in. Everything else is, if it starts to go into territory that you don't like, then you just say, I don't want to do this. The same way you would do anything in your life. It's just like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. The other thing about it is, what might happen is there might be a really well-informed journalist. You're an environmental expert and they've been an environmental reporter for 20 years, although those people are long since left the profession, but maybe you're lucky. And they ask you a question that's really difficult. They're really well informed, the journalists, they know what they're talking about, they've done their homework, and you don't know the answer to this question. You're also allowed to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I will try to find out. Can I get back to you? And you're allowed to say that on broadcast, you're allowed to say that on television, you're allowed to say that in an interview with Al Jazeera, whoever. You're allowed to say, I don't know. Sorry, I'll try and find out. So in other words, you're allowed to be human. You're allowed to say, I don't like this, I don't want to carry on, or I don't know, or that's a really tricky question. This is what I think, but this is just my opinion. And the other thing I would say is, when you're about to express an opinion, the first thing you say is, this is my opinion, not the opinion of my boss, not the opinion. So there may be things you have to think about there if you work for an organization. You may need to be quite clearly distinguishing yourself and your opinions from your organization. So those are the things to consider. The only other thing I will say This is not really about things getting tricky, but it is an issue that comes up repeatedly when we do media training, is somebody always asks, can I ask to see the story before it is published? Or can I ask to hear the interview before it is broadcast? And the answer is you can ask, but they're going to say no. They're going to say no. 99% of the time, they're going to say no, you can't. Because journalists, it's an absolute fundamental principle of journalism, is that the interview is the interview. You can't go back and say, no, I didn't say that. Any more than a politician on the stage who says something really foolish and it gets reported in the newspaper can say, I didn't say that. I want you to take that story back and take it out because I didn't mean that. If they said it, then they said it. So the interview is regarded as an article of history to a journalist. It's a sacrosanct thing. And you can't go, no, actually, I've changed my mind. I don't want to say that. So that's why you need to prepare. You need to be very clear in your head about what you're saying, what you're not saying. That gets better with time. What you can sometimes do is, if it's an incredibly technically complex subject, you're an expert in the in-depth bits and pieces of TB vaccines, and the publication is doing a feature on it, you can say, could I see the article so that I can check if you've got all the facts correct? And you will quite often, if you've established a relationship with that journalist, get a positive response. And then what you do is you literally look at the facts. Have they said the three? Are the actual percentages correct? Are the facts correct? You can't say, I don't think I said that and I want to change the wording on that. Apart from anything else except on a live broadcast, the journalist can send you what they wrote and you will edit what they wrote. And then it goes into a machine of sub-editing and reprocessing and cutting and all sorts of things. And what turns out at the end is not at all what the journalist wrote in the first place. So to some extent, you're wasting everybody's time if you ask to see the story. I remember as a health reporter many years ago, I wrote a long story about there was a meningitis outbreak. And it was a long, very carefully constructed story. I spoke to 3 different experts. I had all the facts, all the figures, what people needed to do to keep their children safe, what. And it got cut to 4 paragraphs on the front page because they wanted it on the front page.
Wow.
And that happens all the time. I was very cross because I worked hard, but that's what happened. And so and the people I interviewed were cross because they spent a lot of time with me. It's not, many of these things are not in the control of the individual journalist that you speak to. So yeah, that's my lecture.
Thank you very
Any
much.
questions, thoughts?
Can I jump in, Renee?
Yes,
I just
absolutely.
want to add something to what Renee was saying about asking to see the story. What I always allowed as editor was for people to ask to see their quotes. So, I think sometimes that's quite comforting for someone you've interviewed to just let them see their quotes only if they ask for it, because especially if it's technical, so they can make sure the reporters understood them properly and is not misrepresenting anything that they've said or because they've misunderstood it. So I think everyone is entitled to ask to see their direct quotes. But I wouldn't have sent anybody the article at all. So yeah.
Interesting. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean it's a policy thing that's changed over the years. Certainly when I was a young reporter, it was absolutely not ever going to be countenanced. I think that changed quite a lot over time. But it's a very tricky area. Know that if you ask, it's possible that they're going to say no, it is the policy of our publication not to do that.
Yeah.
Or it is the policy of our publication to let you see your quotes. Or, yeah, sure, but remember that it's not going to appear in that way at all.
Yeah.
But it is expect that you're not quite going to get what you want out of that question. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Any questions from any of the participants? Anyone in the session? Want to ask questions about that? Or even share if you have experiences linked to these topics? I see we have quite a few fellows here. It doesn't look like it. Okay. All right. So if there are no questions, I guess the last part is about your visibility or creating opportunities of visibility after you've been in an interview. And I think I've had a few, so I'll share some of mine. Maybe others will as well, given that the fellows have had interviews as well. But the way that I've done it is that I've created posts, whether I'm going to be appearing on radio or whatever it is. It's going to be at this time, and I'd make a little post about that. And then I'd make sure that I do a post after the fact as well, thanking the person that had interviewed me or had given me the opportunity to be visible, and using social media to do that. So that is definitely something that has worked for me. It's also helped me create or build on my relationships. And the same with if I've written an opinion piece and I've had that published, going back to them and saying thank you and making sure that I'm putting it on every single social media platform that I can. And giving it a life on LinkedIn, I think, because that's a space where people will always go back and look at those posts or those links. So yeah, that's kind of what I've done, and trying to link, like you said earlier, Renee, finding those people and looking at who's at what publication, who's doing what. Also then trying to link to them. So I'll send them a message on LinkedIn with a link of my last opinion piece or whatever else I think they'd be interested in. So I think that there are different ways of making sure that you can capitalize on those and there's more visibility. So awesome. I do see that there are, Telana has posted as well saying I was interviewed for the beeld in English and the journalist translated it in Afrikaans. That's amazing. So she asked me to check that the translated meaning I shared was correct. Oh, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much for sharing. Anything that you would like to add, our two experts, to this conversation? What else could be done in order to kind of build those relationships and help foster my visibility in future?
You know what is helpful, Renee, is if you, as an expert, if there are conferences or things that will attract the media, always go up to the media and introduce yourself. Tell them who you are, tell them what you do, and give them your card. I think people don't quite understand what a gift that is to a journalist. So if they've been sent to cover an agricultural conference and you're an expert from a university in a particular field, give them an invitation to contact you. And yeah, it's always a good thing to do. And ask, like Talana being interviewed for Die Beeld, say to that journalist, if your colleagues ever do a story in my field, tell them to contact me.
Yeah,
it's you've got to sell yourself to the media at every single opportunity you get. Like their stories, comment on their stories online, and they'll get to know you.
Yeah. I think also tagging them. If I go to conferences and I'm busy, I don't even know what the word is now, but it was tweet. When I'd be tweeting, I'd be tagging them. And that made a difference, because then someone would reach out and say, or all of a sudden you'd see a publication following you and you're like, oh, okay, what's that about? But it is one way of also creating that visibility. Awesome. Thank you. Anything from your end, Renee?
No, just to say that I wonder what's going on about X that used to be Twitter, because it used to be that if you wanted to schmooze journalists, to put it absolutely crudely, you went to Twitter, because journalists all love Twitter because it's gossip. I mean, journalists love gossip. I mean, you are inherently a nosy person. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in this job. You want to know about other people, right? It's so like gossip. So, I mean, I love Twitter. I loved it. I loved it. I'm not there anymore because I can't. I cannot be on that platform. It's just no. So I'm wondering, as an expert wanting to make contact with journalists, it was wonderful, and I'm just wondering to what extent it still is, or whether it's, I don't know. Yeah, how many journalists are still hanging in there grimly? I think that it'll get better.
And how many are on Blue Sky, maybe, as an option?
Yeah, I moved to Blue Sky, but I'm not as active there as I was on Twitter. But I mean, the principle holds. The principle is, if you can meet them in person, first prize. If you can make contact on social media, second prize. You know, but all of it is work. But the work starts with figuring out who your tribe is. It's not who there are all these journalists in South Africa. Which are the ones and I'll just talk to all of them. It is, my field is health. So who are the health journalists? And actually, you just have to go and find them. You have to go and look at all the big publications, find out who the health editor is, find out, be on LinkedIn, find out where the debates are, do the research. You're going to have to figure out, and then those journalists are the subset that you're trying to make relationships with, basically. And it could be that your person is a hugely established court reporter or whatever. I mean, there's an amazing woman called Tanya Broughton who writes for, she used to be on the KZN newspapers. She now writes for Roundup. She's one of the court reporters. So you're a lawyer and you make contact with Tanya Broughton. But it's not to say that there isn't a junior journalist who's interested in court reporting and that you shouldn't make contact with that person as well. Yeah. Because that person may be your contact in 10 years' time. So don't dismiss that very young woman in the corner who looks terrified, because she could be your contact in 10 years' time as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Here I have Tilana saying that she was found by a media through her website too. So yeah, she created a page on the site entitled For Media, where she's listed some of her interviews. That's amazing. So yeah, maybe that is a good idea for people who have their own websites. Great. Thank you for that. Okay, yeah, so Steph was just echoing that. Awesome. Thank you very much. So this is really us coming to the end of the session. Are there any other questions or comments? And again, this is a session where you can feel free to unmute and put your camera on if you'd like. And let us know if you want any more of these sessions. I think this is quite useful. As someone who's also been, because of Quote This Woman, being contacted by the media, there's some of the things that I haven't kind of worked out or figured out yet. So thank you. The session has been really helpful in that sense. Anyone else? Or any last words from our two experts? Anything you'd like to leave people with, Steph?
Yeah, I think everyone must just remember that journalists are human, and they're no one to be scared of. Just chat to them. The journalists that you build proper relationships with, the ones of trust, and where you have a mutual understanding. You can always say, if they ask you a question and you can't answer it because it's information that is a little bit sensitive, say that to the journalist. You can even say to them, I'm telling you something off the record, but it's not for publication. As long as you know the journalist really well, they'll understand, and they can be your ally in so many ways. So yeah.
Thank you.
Hug a journalist.
Thank you. Anything from your end, Renee, as we getting ready to part?
Just to say that, I mean, if you're an expert sort of starting out, an early career expert, I think the place to start, as I've said, is researching who's publishing reader-focused content in your field. So you're a health expert, so you're looking for health publications. But it's possible to cast your net wider. It's possible that your very arcane research on the Ebola virus has that there is expertise that you have around that is of general interest, and that you can share with people in wider publications. So yes, do your homework. Yes, focus on the journalists in the publications that are in your field, but don't forget that there are ways in which your expertise can be helpful in a much broader field than you possibly think. So I mean, it's a thing we do all the time at Quote This Woman. But what in your research can be turned into a story that is useful to other people? And then just to say, as a completely sideways hint, people always forget the biggest employer of journalists in this country is the SABC. We never think about the SABC, even as a publication we should think about. But look at the SABC, check their news website, look for the bylines, look for those journalists. They are, last time I looked, they were employing about 1,000 people. It's probably less now because they're retrenching like everybody else. But all of those community radio stations have huge readerships, huge. And if you speak the language of that particular community station, make contact with those journalists, find those people, the community newspapers as well. We tend to think it's News 24 and the Sunday Times and Field and whatever, but there is very vibrant community media out there in which you're maybe not reaching potential funders, but you are nevertheless reaching people who need your information, A, and B, in that field, you can actually get quite good practice in talking to journalists. That's lower key than I'm in News 24 and I'm hoping Gates Foundation will see it.
Mhm.
You know, it's like,
Yeah.
why? Yeah. So, yeah, that's my final thing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So to those of you who are listening to this, being part of this, thank you so much for your time. Please do share it with your colleagues, with your friends, with your family. This will be posted on YouTube, and it will be accessible going forward. So yeah, thank you so much. Remember, keep quoting Women Plus. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.